Welcome everyone to the Blue Economy CRC webinar series for 2025. I'm Professor Irene Penesis. I'm the Research Director in the Blue Economy CRC, and I'm going to be facilitating this webinar along with my co-facilitator from the CRC, Dr. Simon Wilcock, who's joining us today. Firstly, on behalf of the CRC, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we work today, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. The Blue Economy CRC was established to undertake industry-focused research and training to support the growth of the blue economy, with a focus on two new emerging and transitioning ocean industries for Australia: offshore aquaculture production and renewable energy production. The CRC currently at the moment has 43 participants from Australia and 9 other countries around the globe. And the purpose of the CRC was to perform world-class collaborative industry-focused research and training that underpins the growth of the blue economy through increased offshore sustainable aquaculture and renewable energy production. You know, our vision in the CRC is to make Australia's blue economy industries in offshore sustainable seafood and co-located renewables to be globally competitive, really at the forefront of innovation, underpinned by a really robust environmental planning and management framework that consumers trust and value. Seafood Industry Australia and the Blue Economy CRC have actually joined forces to deliver a fisheries research development corporation funded project called Alternative Energy Solutions for Aquaculture, supported with funding from FRDC on behalf of the Australian government. And that project team has gathered information about the energy use across Australian aquaculture and technology options for carbon reduction in aquaculture operations. And we are hosting a Decarbonisation Australia aquaculture event in Melbourne this week. And we will actually be visiting Toyota, visiting the Hydrogen Discovery Centre at Toyota. And look, we're really going to be sharing and discussing information with all the peak bodies and members representing the sectors in Australia's aquaculture industry. And so to complement that event, what is happening this week, we are also hosting this excellent webinar on hydrogen in Australia, where we are. And of course, this is off the back of a lot of work that the CRC has been involved in. Many of you will have heard that we recently launched in March this year our hydrogen production and research facility that's located at BOC Australia in Latana in Hobart. And this is Tasmania's first green hydrogen production facility, supporting research and training for blue economy industries, but also providing commercial scale hydrogen for industry and transport applications. And one of those applications is we are supporting a Tasmanian government operational trial comparing battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell buses in Australia, and we are supplying hydrogen to that trial. Of course, Australia's 2019 National Hydrogen Strategy has led to a large export-centred projects being envisaged before really an industry existed to support them. And in the resulting shakeout, we've seen a lot of smaller projects across a range of industries that have been funded. And the updated National Hydrogen Strategy in 2024 now focuses on accelerating clean hydrogen industry growth with objectives across our supply, demand and decarbonisation, community benefit and trade, investments and partnerships. So today we're going to hear from 5 experts that have kindly agreed to participate in this webinar about what's happening in Australia in relation to government policy and incentives, around key developments in industry and mobility projects, and in research that's underpinning really tomorrow's developments. So in light of that, I wanted to mention, following those presentations, we will have a Q&A after those 5 presentations that Simon Wilcock and I will facilitate. So please do place your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can also upvote any of your questions that you wish to be answered so that those popular votes get prioritised at the top of the list. And our speakers are very knowledgeable in the hydrogen space and are going to be very capable of answering the questions that you might have today through this webinar as you hear about what's been happening across Australia. So without any further ado, I'd like to start with our first presentation on hydrogen and the coordination challenge which we've kindly invited Fiona Simons, who's the CEO from the Australian Hydrogen Council. Thank you, Fiona. We will ask for you to give our opening presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Irene. It's a pleasure to be here. Can I just confirm you can see my slides?
Absolutely, we can. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, again, thanks for having me. So I'm the CEO of the Australian Hydrogen Council, and the Australian Hydrogen Council represents companies across the hydrogen value chain. Hydrogen, I just want to be clear, I also mean ammonia and methanol, the things that we make with hydrogen. And that also includes iron and alumina. So it's all of these things that you can do with hydrogen. Please consider that when I talk about hydrogen as all of those other clean molecules and products that can underpin decarbonisation. Our role is really to connect industry and government around the systems that turn these molecules into markets through coordinated policy, infrastructure, and investment. So I'm going to start with a bit of a quick global sort of context piece. I want to start with what we do use hydrogen for, and I just mentioned some of the list of things before, but so we use it for decarbonising aspects of our economy that can't easily be electrified. So the fundamental lowest regrets version of what we do with hydrogen is if you couldn't electrify, and also where electricity wouldn't have been an option. So there's the chemical uses of hydrogen as well. And that includes how we make ammonia, how we make methanol, and how we actually manage the initial process of iron making with iron ore and being able to reduce it to clean iron. So this figure comes from released this year from the International Energy Agency. It's a global hydrogen review. It was in the last month or so, 2025. It compares the levelised cost of production for three major products made with hydrogen, so methanol, ammonia, and steel. And the rows that say con is really sort of the existing ways of doing things, and the low is the low carbon way of doing things. The blue bars here show capital costs, the green and the teal operating and energy costs respectively. Yellow is materials, and the grey shows the CO2 cost if we were to apply a carbon price of about $100 US per tonne. So you can see that the conventional fossil fuel production still looks cheaper today, but the picture changes once you factor carbon in. The cost gap does narrow substantially. Now, of course, there's an awful lot of variability in this slide. But the overall point is the real piece is that competitiveness isn't just about technology, it's about context. Hydrogen and its derivatives can be competitive, but very much in systems that are designed for them to succeed. This map's also from the same document. It shows projected hydrogen production costs in 2030. It's the reason why Australia matters in this overarching story. So the deep red and orange areas are the lowest cost zones where we could make hydrogen, roughly $2 to $4 a kilogram. China, as you can see, so dark orangey red is the clear low cost leader, and the next broad sort of swathes of opportunity are in the Middle East and Australia. And when you look closely, parts of Australia are actually still a deeper orange again, edging toward the red. So we're right on the competitive frontier. There were some low cost pockets in the Americas, but nothing else that really combines scale and land availability and renewables to the degree that we, Middle East and China, do. So if you overlay this with the previous chart, it suggests that Australian hydrogen and derivative products could sit toward the lower end of those global cost curves for ammonia, methanol, and green iron. We have a structural advantage here, our geography, our solar and our wind, as well as our capability to do things at an industrial scale and our trusted partnerships. But turning that into actual competitiveness still depends on what happens next. It's the policy architecture and the institutional coordination that support investment. More is needed to close the gap. So this is a slide, this is my slide. It brings together AHC top-down and bottom-up analysis, essentially our current view based on current data of the total sort of realisable market, if you like, for hydrogen-enabled commodities, the share that then there's realistically serviceable, and then a smaller proportion that's actually being built. The blue bars on the left represent our domestic decarbonisation, so the potential and pipeline particularly for ammonia, alumina, and iron across Australia's safeguard facilities. We don't make methanol here anymore. The green bars on the right show the export market opportunities, and that's ammonia, methanol, and green iron. I haven't got alumina there as a new market. At this stage, it looks as though it's very much in greening our existing market where we are a major exporter. So taking a conservative view, and here I do want to note I was very conservative. We could have a gross value added amount of almost $9 billion Australian per annum for hydrogen-enabled commodities by 2050. And to come to that amount, I'm adding together columns 2 and column 5. So that's a reasonable amount that we could achieve, but we are not yet achieving. This goes to past $11 billion GVA if we start using green iron made with hydrogen in our domestic steelworks. So that's me using the column number 1 with the column number 5. Alumina does make a difference though. Here I've assumed likelihood for hydrogen for calcination. It's actually sort of 50-50. If that is not the path taken for alumina in Australia, that will mean that some of the benefit falls in the safeguard columns because that won't be the way we go. Now, our current pipeline, but again, I'm giving very, very conservative probabilities here, given where the projects are at. It's closer to $2.8 billion gross value add by 2050, and that's the columns 3 and 4 if you add them together. Now, you can see then there's a sizable gap. We need to at least close that gap to that 8.8, and much of this can be affected by policy. Now, before I move on, I just want to be clear, this is much less than what people had said in the past about opportunities for hydrogen. There's reasons for that. The 2 main ones I'd point out is that we are already seeing a reset of expectations, and that's just because things have been much harder than people had expected. There are projects that have fallen over that hadn't at the time. There were earlier estimations made. We've all suffered globally from massive inflationary pressures and unfortunately to a degree of a shift almost back to let's not hurry the energy transition along too much, and there's major geopolitical reasons for that. This is all having an effect on how we think about it in Australia. So it's not about us necessarily making the new LNG, but it's not nothing. So what I'm trying to show you here is that we're talking about still an ability at a very conservative level for us to do something which is significant for Australia. It's bigger than some of our major current export markets, like beef, for example. And that also does provide a defensive posture to support existing economic complexity in Australia, because we're not very economically complex. We keep decarbonising through deindustrialising. Ideally, we can actually start making things more, and this is about the story that helps us to do more making. Now to the policy piece. So much of what we need to have in place are policy settings that move across a range of dimensions that help close the gap. And it's everything from just the fundamental sort of fiscal settings. So, the cost of capital in Australia, it's about how we value things through like sustainable finance in the broad sense. I've shown here a range of the policy measures at the federal level that do have an impact on where we're at. This is not everything. It is, for us, the main sections. So for us in hydrogen, there's the updated National Hydrogen Strategy, which was released in September last year. Now that was a review, if you like, of our appetite and our capabilities as of last year, after we'd had the previous 5 years or so with a 2019 hydrogen strategy, which is very much the product of its time. So our national hydrogen strategy now is far more focused on some of these big industrial products. So I mentioned ammonia and green metals, and that all fits also within a policy package called the Future Made in Australia. And the Future Made in Australia policy package has an umbrella piece over over funding for hydrogen, and that includes the hydrogen production tax incentive. And I've coloured a few pieces in red here. There's a Future Made in Australia Innovation Fund. There's pieces that have been pulled out and labelled low carbon liquid fuels. There's green metals. There's a clean energy tech component. And there's also the Net Zero Fund, which at the moment it's been a subject of consultation, where this was announced a couple of weeks ago by the Australian government when they released the Net Zero Plan and our sector plans, where there's $5 billion from the existing $15 billion for the National Reconstruction Fund that's been earmarked for the technologies, and we have contributed to that overall consultation. So some of the things I just mentioned there were hydrogen specific. A lot is not. It is an overarching ecosystem that we're seeing get up. But it's all still bedding in. We're watching this as a shift from decades of let the market decide, moving towards more of a model of industrial policy, which is not a comfortable place for a lot of people because it does talk about picking winners, and that's necessarily a risky and uncomfortable place for a government to be. But we are seeing the federal government in particular leaning into acting as a system architect, coordinating, co-investing and the like, because that's what it takes. If I look at hydrogen alone, we need a whole ecosystem. We don't have a market yet for this in its clean and green version. People talk about how, well, solar took a long time and LNG took a long time, and look how those got up. True. They took a long time, and we already used electrons and we already used natural gas molecules. There was already a market for that. What we're talking about in our situation is entirely new supply chains, technology and equipment, and in an environment where no one ever wants to pay more and we don't have a carbon price. So there's a big institutional challenge here. It requires governments to take on roles that we really haven't seen since the post-war industrial era. We're managing common user infrastructure, integrating portfolios, and accepting more risk through special investment vehicles like the CEFC, Irene, Export Finance Australia, the Northern Australia Investment Fund, or NAIF, and then also the National Reconstruction Fund Corporation. So yes, we're in the world of building ecosystems, and what we need is alignment across the funding mechanisms between the states and the federal governments. And there's the Net Zero Economy Authority, which is also taking a genuine coordination role. If we can manage all this, then Australia's natural advantages start to become competitive benefits, and that gap between ambition and delivery starts to close. Now, coming back to where our hydrogen production is most likely, if I use just the safeguard facilities that are just for ammonia, alumina and iron, well, here we are. Again, we don't have them so far to make e-fuels. We don't make methanol anymore. So these are the existing safeguard facilities where a number of them would be likely to use hydrogen to decarbonise. And we can see some of these are logical places where there are these co-located sites, narrowing down to these coastal regions across the states. So what's happening now is policy to help decarbonise these facilities and combine that with export opportunities through the nearby ports to really manage both domestic resilience and international competitiveness. So we're moving to this sort of place-based precinct piece because we know that it's not hydrogen for everything for everyone all the time. Now, it might well be at some point, but at this stage, it's the minimum effort, lowest regrets is still pretty massive pieces of work. Now, our current language for how we think about the place-based approach tends to arrive pretty quickly to social licence to operate, or SLO. And as you'd know, this is a pretty broad term. It lacks precise definition. It tends to mean the tacit acceptance of a community for a project in their midst. And it's a major industry for the energy transition, as you would all be aware. We're not seeing projects, we're seeing projects get delayed and community members struggling to accept projects in their midst. And it's led to a range of various policy initiatives, and one of them included last year's consultation report from the then Australian Energy and Infrastructure Commissioner into community engagement. And I think the findings of that research and everything that we always hear about is that we're going to a fundamental reorientation right now that needs to be made when we're talking about social licence, if it was something precise that can be addressed with just communication, and to more of an entire framework. So again, we are seeing a recognition of precincts and facilities and regions and the work of Net Zero Australia, the Net Zero Economy Authority, and the different states are doing more now to provide master planning and do the like of that. So here's my version of some of the things that sit under that social licence to operate that really do need to get combined from governments, strong leadership from all layers of government that then percolate into and inform everything that the community values. Much of it does need to come from government. This isn't all the issues, but it's just some of them. But basically what we're needing now is not only the funding and the support that way, and we definitely need demand drivers and the like to be put into place from a policy perspective, but also about this integrated industrial planning, because we're seeing industry get concerned that it's all too complex, that it's all too expensive, and it's really hard to compete with some of the more coordinated countries out there, particularly in the Gulf states, that basically roll out the red carpet and say, we'll pay for all that infrastructure, come on in. So what we're trying to do now is focus on this common user infrastructure, how we can support state and federal governments and their agencies to get it in place, and then combine that with the contracts for difference, the precinct-specific support mechanisms that can help, reduce commercial gaps and the like, and to bring all of this together, because this ecosystem doesn't happen on its own. So I might end there, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fiona. I really appreciate it. Very, very nice overview of where things are at the moment in Australia. And where industry is at as well, and where the focus is, which is fantastic. And I think the resetting of expectations has been a very good one for Australia in terms of being conservative, but thinking more about, where we can play a really significant role in Australia. I might now move to Andrew Willis. Andrew Willis is the Business Development Manager at Toyota Motor Corporation in Australia. And he's going to be talking to us about Toyota Australia's hydrogen insights, but really about some of the mobility projects that they're supporting and some of the fuel cell developments that they're doing and an application. So thank you very much, Andrew, for joining us. Please feel free to share your slides.
Now, has that come through correctly, or?
We can't see it in presenter view yet.
Is it? No. Let me try again.
Thank you, Andrew.
So it's not there yet. One moment. Has that come up with the presentation now?
It sure has. Thank you so much,
Perfect.
Andrew. And the CRC has been really enjoying the engagement with Toyota, learning about your hydrogen fuel cell generators and vehicles. So over to you.
Look, thank you, Irene. And look, what I might step through now is a little bit about what Toyota's doing in the hydrogen space, and it's some of the applications we have now or we're testing or evaluating and looking to bring to market shortly. So I'm part of Toyota's new business solutions team. So we obviously have a very large company that's heavily focused on bringing light and commercial vehicles to the Australian market. But in addition to that, medium and long-term solutions in terms of how do we decarbonise some of the tailpipe emissions and things that we have, products we're bringing to market. So just a starting point is that a lot of the products we look at, there's a whole range of different engines or types of powertrain technologies which could be used in market. So battery electric, it's very, very good. And generally speaking, from Toyota's perspective, we think that that works extremely well, particularly for smaller vehicles, shorter distances, last mile, someone driving to and from work, commuting, we can recharge, refuel. But predominantly as you move into the big heavy end of mobility, the trucks, the buses, the light commercial vehicles and those forklifts and other things on the road side of things, and particularly hydrogen suits pretty well. But that, in addition to that, we also see that at the moment, particularly hybrid vehicles and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles have got roles to play. And into the future, e-fuels, biofuels, biodiesel and the like may have another role that sort of can help decarbonise mobility or transport, but in a way that keeps some of the engine technologies and things that we already have in market. So Toyota's already got a range of hybrid vehicles in the Australian market. We have a battery electric vehicle, we have fuel cell vehicles. So we're taking this multi-pathway approach, making sure that we're delivering product matched to customer needs. You can have the best product in the world, but if it doesn't match the customer needs or their expectations, it's not going to go very far. And particularly things like our learnings from the introduction of hybrid vehicles back in 2001, when we introduced Prius to the Australian market. It took us a good 15 to 17 years to normalise and get the market acceptance of that technology. and also be able to roll it out across the mainstream models that we have in the market. So again, shifting to battery electric or fuel cell type technologies, there's more to be done. We need to build confidence, particularly infrastructure to support it, and the source of the hydrogen or the electricity becomes important as well. So when we look specifically in the hydrogen space, so we have available in the Australian market Mirai. It's a large sedan. It's a nice compact unit. It's a good way to get bums in seats to test and evaluate and to see the technology. We equally have battery electric vehicles in that scale or size vehicle as well, either in Australia or overseas. But predominantly, and on this chart, you'll start to see there's a whole range of particularly bigger and heavier applications. And again, that's where we sort of see the natural fit for hydrogen, and particularly in an economy like Australia. We have forklifts, which we've been using in our parts warehouses for a number of years now, in conjunction with some battery electric versions we're doing. We have a number of buses. We have the Catano bus we brought from the UK domestic market. And recently we brought in a Sora bus, which has been used in the Japan domestic market. And we're exploring some local applications for that now into the near future. In addition to that, PACCAR Kenworth have got the same Toyota fuel cell technology, but used in their big prime mover. So they've been evaluating and looking at that in the Australian context. Again, Irene touched on before, another application, not just mobility or moving, using the technology to move around, but the stationary generators using the same base technology. We can use that to effectively replace diesel generators and other things. Internationally, Toyota's looking at a range of other things, HiAce, Hilux, which are particularly of interest in the Australian context, but heavy-duty trucks and chase boats, things like they used in the America's Cup when it was held in New Zealand. There's other applications and things where the base, the foundation technology can be used in a range of different ways. One of the exciting things is a bit like we've seen over many years, the improvement in the technologies over time. So we already know that from a Toyota's perspective, the foundation within the vehicles that we have, or the applications, is the fuel cell. So that's what's taking the hydrogen and converting it into electricity, which is then powering the electric motors which drive the vehicles. The next generation of that fuel cell technology will happen late 2027 and beyond, and that'll deliver fuel efficiency improvements or range improvements in the vicinity of 20%. That's a huge jump. Traditionally, if we were changing an engine in a vehicle or something, if we get an 8 or 10% efficient improvement, that was big. But to get a 20% improvement, so to put it into context, the Mirai, which we have in the Australian market at the moment, it's got a driving range of around about 650 kilometres. So that jumps to about 780 kilometres if we don't change anything else, just because of the improvement in the technology which is coming in the near future. So that base fuel cell stack, or that technology and its applications, can be fairly broad-based in the mobility space and stationary energy generators. So yes, it can be boats and planes and cars and buses and trucks and you name it. There's a broad base of applications for it. The other thing, I'm not sure if the other thing I mentioned on this slide is that we're moving to different derivatives of the fuel cell stack. So at the moment, the same technology, the same base unit is used in the Mirai as what we use in the trucks and buses. But what we're doing into the future is we're going to have different scale or size fuel cell units matched to their use cases. So that'll allow us then to more readily adapt and match to customer expectations. Again, the fuel cell stationary generator. So effectively replacement for diesel generator. We locally assemble in Melbourne at our Altona, our old manufacturing site. We take the base fuel cell technology, build it into a unit, and we're providing it to both the domestic and export markets. So 110 kVA, that's equivalent to about 8 to 10 households worth of energy maximum rated capacity of what we can produce at any point of time. The advantage of fuel cell is that it's a variable load. So if you need less output, less electricity to power things, it runs at a lower level or can switch into effectively off mode. Or if you need more, then it increases like an accelerator. It just draws more hydrogen and creates more electricity based on demand. So the use cases of the applications to date, a range of infrastructure, construction and mining sector. Outdoor events, we've had it at F1, Velo, AFL events and other things, telecommunication backup, EV chargers. So for instance, in holiday peak periods when you need a lot of energy or rapid charging for things, we can co-locate these and provide additional charging points where maybe it doesn't make sense throughout the rest of the year. And also remote sites and powering things, it creates a lot of opportunity as well. The other way that we're looking to use hydrogen is we're looking to take the internal combustion engine, a diesel engine, a petrol engine, and burning it in the cylinders. So it doesn't have the efficiency of a fuel cell, but it provides potentially a lower cost way to bring product to market, or the potential to even retrofit in the Australian market for products which are already using diesel or other things, and reduce the CO2 footprints significantly, not zero, but significantly reduce it. So we've had trials that we've been running in Australia. We've got more trials we're doing next year with some upgrade versions of the technology. And it's something, again, that we're looking in conjunction to things like Hilux and HiAce for fuel cell. We're also exploring hydrogen internal combustion engine applications as well. Importantly, and I think Fiona touched on, one of the issues is that you need to match and look at the whole ecosystem. So you've got to produce the hydrogen somewhere. Potentially, if it's not the location where you're dispensing it or using the hydrogen, you need to transport it to where it's needed, and ideally only short distances. Otherwise, the logistics cost sort of starts to mount up and makes hydrogen expensive. Just through our own efforts, we have that in Melbourne. So we've got it mated with our 5 megawatt solar system, so we can connect in and use green renewables to generate through electrolysis the hydrogen. We can store it and we can dispense it at variable pressures based on customer needs. We also have had versions up in Sydney and another one which have been moving around to different places. Touched on that generally, if you're making hydrogen in very large scale, the economies of scale is what helps you reduce the price of the hydrogen. Tube trailers and manifold packs become important. You need to grow the scale of those things as well to move the hydrogen so you can use it where you need to dispense it matched to the customer needs. So just to close off, Toyota's looking at a range of products which we're bringing to market, from light to medium to heavy vehicles. There's a range of local collaborations we're working where potentially we can use fuel cell technology with others in some of their opportunities. But we need to make that or match that to the hydrogen production and the hydrogen refueling infrastructure. So we need to grow that and have the collaboration across industry to make those things all happen at the same time. I might leave it there, but thank you very much for the time.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Really appreciate you talking about what Toyota's been investing in and developing. There was a question in the Q&A, and I know that you are at an event and you'll be leaving us, but there was a question around whether you can use methanol to run a fuel cell. Maybe you'd like to just answer. thank everyone, every single presenter and everyone who attended the webinar for your attendance.
Thank you.